Good evening, everyone. My name's Kim Bills, for those of you who I haven't met. I'm a member here and I'm a relatively new member of the PCNet task force, just about a year. And I'm emceeing tonight. So we'll start with just the basics. If you don't already know, the men's and gents toilets are either side of the door where you came in. They're the main ones. There is another one back there, but let's not worry about that just at the moment, unless you need to sing out. Fergus McGinley out the back, who's managing the IT, the videoing, etc., can also assist you, as he's a local too. There are others here also. So we'll start with an acknowledgement of First Peoples, and then I will introduce Jonathan Barker. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we gather on the land of the Kaurna people, whose spiritual sovereignty flows through the generations. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and we give thanks for the opportunity to live among First Nations people who are part of the oldest living culture on earth. And we continue to hope and act for reconciliation in this land. So, to the Reverend Dr. Jonathan Barker, if you're here for critical issues facing the future of humanity, you're in the right place. I was once, unfortunately, at the front of a lecture theatre with a lecture on Piaget's psychology, and I couldn't escape, but I don't think there's any such problem tonight. So, the Reverend Dr. Jonathan Barker has served many churches across Australia. His experience in community development began in Chicago, resourcing the Department for Social Welfare's Community Councils of Social Development. He integrated this experience into ministry practice, for example, working with the Moanjum Aboriginal community in the Kimberleys and ministering with the homeless in Bondi Beach. Jonathan's retirement interests include integrating theology with social practice, so he keeps his brain working, and support for an informed appreciation of First Nations peoples. Jonathan and his wife Janine are long-standing members of the Progressive Christianity Network of South Australia Task Force and often lead worship Only Uniting Church. So, without further ado, Jonathan, critical issues facing the future of humanity, a small topic for us all to digest.
Thank you so much, Kim, for that introduction. This is a repeat. Almost 12 months ago, David Skews, who I thought might be here tonight, invited me to speak at a forum run by the Anthroposophical Society here in Adelaide, and its topic was the future of humanity, and this is what I offered on that night. The actual text of what I'm going to say is not long, so there's going to be space for you to talk with each other and to consider the ideas that I'm going to be putting forward. So, the process is I'll read a section or sections, and then I'll raise a question or ask you to respond. And certainly welcome to those of you who are live streaming. I might add that when we're in groups, I will have up on the screen the text for you to look at and to consider on your own if you're watching this by yourself. I frame my thoughts around 5 key words. The first is globality. Whatever the future beholds, it requires us to recognise the reality of globality and to see ourselves, the imperative to see ourselves as citizens above all else, as citizens of the globe. There will be no future for humanity and all living things unless peoples of the earth counter the existential threat posed by human-induced warming of the planet. And here I go off text a little. Recently, and others of you heard me already advocate for the fantastic series on ABC TV called Earth. And it tracks really the very beginnings of this planet, all the epochs. I think there are 6 in the series, and of course you get to the 6th, and that's when human beings evolve. And with human beings evolving, something new has happened. After all the epochs that have been named after given geological names, for example, it's now said that we live in an age called the Anthropocene, where human intervention is influencing and shaping the whole ecosystem of planet Earth. I did a bit of research and saw that not everybody's happy, particularly geologists, with necessarily calling it the Anthropocene epoch, but there seems to be an emerging consensus. Is that what we're calling it? Where the last of the series on Earth says it's human will that has made the difference. When did the latest actually, the controversy is, when did the Anthropocene begin? Some say, well, it's the Industrial Revolution. Others say, no, it could have been 50,000 or 60,000 years ago when people on this continent fired the continent and over millennia actually did shape the planet, or rather the continent of Australia. I thought that was interesting. At a personal level, it means reimagining ourselves as all belonging to one human race. And technologically, there is only one human race. Even though we've got this years of talking about the different races of the world, there's actually one human race. Not identifying primarily by nation or language or ethnicity or sexual orientation, culture or religion. I want to propose that what we should be saying is, I am a citizen of planet Earth above all else. How does such a change in consciousness take place? This sensing oneself as being essentially a citizen of planet Earth. Well, as always, only by being so impacted by reality, that is the reality of the ravages of climate change and the loss of life, that people will sense in their inner being that they have to transcend parochialism. Yes, cognitive dissonance will still affect the minority, but the majority will claim a new identity. Humanity's future requires us to transcend our parochialism. Now I'm going to invite you, with a little bit of jostling of chairs, to form into groups of 3 or 4, whatever's suitable to those around you. And I'm going to ask you to give some thought to what more can be said about globality as a critical issue for survival and the life on the planet. Now you may want to have some questions to ask, but I think take that word and what I've suggested that goes with, and just share amongst yourselves. And I'm only going to give you a short period of time of just 5 or 6 minutes, and then there will be time for a little bit of sharing in the total group. So, reconfigure your chairs into small groups of 3 or 4. And I might add people who are live streaming again. That's the text for the the first word.
I know, Facebook now gives some subtitles
Yeah.
automatically generated, so anyone watching can actually read the subtitles. Now,
Hi, Jonathan. I want you to tell me what you think. What's happening? But I share your opinion.
Okay, friends, that's the 6 minutes. If you could swivel your chairs around a bit. Just a bit of an opportunity to share what might be said in groups. Ken here has the microphone, and because it's live streaming, I'm going to ask that nobody talks except through the microphone. So Ken will take the microphone to you. But let me just sort of ask over this way somewhere, would somebody like to feedback about what you think more can be said about the issue of globality and the future for us? Anybody?
Yes. Microphone's your friend, close.
We observed that it's possibly never easier to be global than it is today because the Middle East and the Ukraine, for example, are brought to our attention every night on the news. But it could be enhanced by our giving individually and sharing, and we just mentioned the foreign aid budget used to be discussed a lot, that we had to aim for 1% of the GDP, but I don't hear it discussed these days at all.
0.2%.
0.2.
That's where we are now.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Someone else? Another group. Marion.
I wasn't too sure if by globality you meant a global consciousness, and I was asking the question whether in fact the extremes of climate change being experienced around the world are actually forcing us into a form of global consciousness. But that may be different from the question that you were asking. So,
No, I think you're expanding on a point that I tried to make. Thank you. Okay. Mike.
I'm not trying to be negative, but be realistic. Sometimes the concept globality can be skewed according to who wants the power in terms of their opinions as to how the global side of it should be, which then also can highlight the differences globally as well. So just because we are communicate globally doesn't mean that we will necessarily, or we have to go more than just simply communication. It's how do we give everybody a voice within that, including the ones that are opposed to us, from all parts of the earth where there is no power for being part of that voice.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, I think that. What does it mean to what's going to take us to transcend our globality, given the fact of the multiplicity of identities that people are holding on to, and in many cases, rightly holding on to at the same time? Okay, well, we're going to go to the second word. Thank you. Now, this might seem a strange word, but it's got a personal history for me. The second word is hybridity, which leads to the imperative of accepting the diverse ethnicities which proliferate around the world. So I think, Mike, we're kind of moving into something that you kind of already pointed us to. I studied for my doctorate through Berkeley, through the San Francisco Theological Seminary, and James Noel was a professor there whom I particularly liked, particularly because he actually lived in a little house next to where I was staying, and I'd get invited over for tea because he wasn't used to having strange Australians around. He was an African-American scholar, and he concluded his last collegium by saying nothing. Instead, he wrote one word on the whiteboard: hybridity. In that part of California, all the workers who flooded in each day, we were situated in Marin County, which some have said is the wealthiest of all counties in the whole of America. The people who worked and did all the services couldn't afford to live there, and so they flooded in on buses and whatever other means of transport. They were mainly people of mixed Mexican-European ancestry, known as Chicanos. Despite Chicano having been a derogatory word, almost a shameful designation, they themselves decided to claim it in a positive way. They accepted being a people of mixed racial ancestry. Chicano identity was something to be claimed with pride. Mixed ancestry is still a very sensitive issue in Australia. Naming who you are has special significance for First Nations people. For many, their identity is a personal choice. And I'll read out the formal description of being identified as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. An Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander is a person of Aboriginal Torres Islander descent who identifies as an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander and is accepted as such by the community in which he or she lives. But those from remote and rural Indigenous communities have an identity which flows from being immersed in their traditional culture and the kinship system, and I refer particularly to people in Central Australia, Arnhem Land, Eastern and Western Arnhem, the Yolngu people, certainly across the Kimberleys and many other places in Australia, certainly in Queensland. These people, in one sense, don't choose to be Aboriginal, they just are. Now, some might say, yeah, but even then they've still got to make a certain kind of choice, but they're kind of so immersed in their culture that they know who they are. Now, while in the United States the word hybridity has currency, I'm very reluctant to suggest that we use it in Australia as such, for good reason, as it will be interpreted as an insult. I reminded of something a Port Lincoln mayor saying something about, he used the word mongrel to describe the Indigenous people there. Well, that didn't go down too well. However, I do recall an Indigenous participant in an international training institute who once leapt her feet and said, "I now have permission to be who I am, an Aboriginal person of mixed ancestry." Lurking behind this is a deep-seated racism which plagues all societies. Now, we are familiar with how racism is endemic in societies dominated by Western culture, especially the Australian version. I think we had a glimpse of that last year. But it exists all over the globe. For example, amongst the Japanese, the Han Chinese, and in India, where one never ever dares to say anything out loud about a person's skin colour. And racist disparagement against First Nations people proliferates all over the world. However, the reality is that more and more in today's world, people also have mixed ancestries. Just as there is a spectrum with sexual identities, so there is a spectrum with ethnicity. It's not binary, just one thing or another. And so the fundamental issue is twofold. First, to decide to be who one is. Second, to honour the fantastic diversity ancestry of others. Humanity's future requires transcending the racism which can so set people apart. And a book that Janine and I read that I'd like to commend to you is called Migrants, The Story of Us All by Sam Miller. It's a really great read. I invite you to go into groups again for another 5 minutes, and to again discuss with yourselves, with each other, what more can be said about, and I'll stick to the word hybridity, as a critical issue for survival of life on Earth. Go to it. And for those watching live streaming, there's the first part of the text.
So I think it is a problem, but it's not really a security. It's not
Just asking if you could wind up in a minute, please. Well, let's come together again and just briefly, anything that we can share with each other on this point as to what more can be said, or any kind of contributions you'd like to make. On this side somewhere.
I want to ask why hybridity is a negative term, because in any kind of interracial breeding, there is such a thing as hybrid vigour, that the offspring are better than either of the races of the parents because they don't express the recessive genes, which do accumulate if you only breed within the same gene pool. And I think hybridity has another positive term in terms of hybrid cars. You can have an oil-based petrol car which pollutes the environment. You can have a totally electric car which you can't charge up in the outback. So a hybrid car is a positive thing. And hybrid vigour is a positive thing.
Well said, Edmund. Of course, I'm using it as a positive word, but I do caution if you go out and use this work in the public discourse. I think you will find that there are people who will struggle with it because mixed race ancestry and identity is still is a challenge for many people. But anyway, thanks for about the positive points to do with hybridity. Mike.
I don't quite understand why people then go into the ancestry thing and try and find their ancestries out, and whether that's something that can be built on, because in actual fact we're all hybrids, and if we go back far enough, that's what he says. Okay, I'll say no.
In fact, I think people are amazed when they discover they've actually got some Neanderthal DNA. Okay, right. Anybody else? One more comment. Okay.
So there's a social theorist called Bruno Latour, who's one of the inventors of actor network theory, and he talks about hybrids in terms of machines and such forth that are actors in their own right, hybrids with humans. And of course now some of the American billionaires are talking about implanting chips in our brains, so we will be hybrids as well. So hybridity has ongoing relevance.
Yes, but I'll just sort of, repeat the very last sentence I made. Humanity's future requires us transcending the racism which can so set people apart. Well, let's move on to the next word. Absolutism. And I'm going to do two words before we then break for sharing. I missed the ABC session which claimed that absolutism is the greatest danger facing our society today. That's the third word. And it rang a bell because I think the polarisation of social issues in particular is just one symptom. It is part of a simplistic, binary interpretation of reality, and then purporting that there's only one thing that is absolutely right. This is a political, social, intellectual and religious issue where, for instance, strong men can rule, so often justified by fake, I think, for and rigged democratic elections. However, such a convergence of power gives credence to Lord Actor's famous dictum: all power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And while civil freedoms are much under threat, I believe that the future of humanity depends on re-empowering democratic institutions so that the power structures can be called to account, whatever the inadequacy of democracy might be. There are religious examples here where followers believe they are absolutely right, and where ecclesiastical institutions can enforce conformity either overtly or covertly. I think as it says, it's overtly or covertly. Make the correction in your text. Binary assumptions lead to interpreting everything through the lens of a very reduced view of the world. People then live in protective bubbles, never exposed to other ideas. Media moguls, who will be nameless, act as if they are endorsed with absolute influence in order to feed people's fantasies. Humanity's future requires transcending and demolishing absolutism. And I've got another book here, which for the last 2 points I think is great to read. It's called Not So Black and White by Keenan Malik, and it's another great read. The other book is readable. This is a great read in the sense it's very dense, but I like to commend it to you. My fourth word is chosenness, and the need to demolish the myth of exceptionalism. Having grown up in the Christian tradition, I can recall the text in the first epistle of Peter: "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession." Do you remember it? "That you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." Now, while the idea of chosenness is justified on the grounds of being chosen for a greater purpose, that is to enlighten the world about the love of God, the sad thing is that a sense of being chosen has morphed into particular peoples, nations and religions thinking that they are ordained with a specialness which sets them above all others, only they are the right ones. Chosenness is linked again to the racism often justified by a mythology or a religion which sets people apart with a good dose of absolutism. The worst legacy of the British Empire is partition, especially when used to justify carving up nations according to religion. No wonder Gandhi wept when Jinnah got his way for having a separate Pakistan. Sadly, the modern state of Israel is now on the brink of becoming a nation where one religion holds total sway. The Balkan Wars of the 90s led to the ghastly ethnic cleansing, and you can no doubt think of other examples. Incidentally, the sense of chosenness is deeply embedded in the Western cultural legacy we have inherited. In America, it's called Manifest Destiny. In Australia, I wonder whether it has been a lucky country. Humanity's future requires demolishing exceptionalism and believing that all peoples, nations, cultures and even religions are equally blessed because they have gifts which can enhance the common civilising process. So, friends, you've got 2 words to spend a little bit of time chatting with each other about, and again it's really the same question. What more can be said about both absolutism and chosenness? And I will scroll back for the text for people watching online. Firstly that one and then the other. So, go to it.
The bigger chance the bread will be down.
Well, if you go back to Exodus and you read what they say, Joshua came in to the lands of God.
Just one more minute, folk. Okay, I'd like you to come and reposition your chairs a little bit, and this time I'll leave the mic to you, Kim, for anybody, and invite anybody who, in the discussions, what more is there to be said, or any other ideas you'd like to share with the total group. Okay, first, Rick, thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Our group was going through the modernity of the 20th century into the postmodern at the end of the 20th century, and this idea of exceptionalism and chosenness as a push back against the idea of the postmodern where relativism and everyone's view was valid. A kind of a natural pendulum swing. Is that your reading of that? I want to see what you think about that.
I tend to see the more positive dimensions of the postmodernist worldview and its emphasis on relationships as being what's mostly crucial. And so I think that is the pathway. To be able to recognise and grasp that reality, I think, opens up the question of, again, how do we relate together? What does it mean to relate together as people of equal worth? What is it relative to? Well, I think there are those who say it's relative to what it means to be human. To be human not just individually, but also as peoples, as communities. So I guess that's my first response, Rick, to your point about the postmodern view. Thank you. Thanks, Max.
Just picking up on that first response, we tossed around a lot of things in this group around the business of absolutism and chosenness and entitlement, and the need for compromise so that people can work together to build a community. But at the same time, if you've got people with disparate points of view, each of those groups needs to keep its own sense of vision of what it sees as the ideal, and trying to balance these competing things. I think my comment was, it's no wonder we don't do it very well. It is so difficult to keep your sense of vision of what's driving you, but also to work with other people with absolutely different visions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. I struggled with where love came in with chosenness, because I saw that getting married, you're choosing someone. But my thinking was changed, and we could talk about love as being an abrogation of chosenness in true love. I think I've got that right.
Okay, anybody else? Well then, let's come to the last word. A little bit different than the others, but I couldn't think of any other word to use. We're going to take up the topic of religion. And I dare to suggest that humanity's future is bound up with religion. And here, and it's interesting how religion is not a very popular word, It's often been said, people will say, well, I'm spiritual but not religious. So there's a kind of negativity associated with the word religion and being religious. But what I mean here is the emergence of a new, what I call a religious sensibility, which is based on imagining a life-affirming story which binds humanity together. It could be called a universalising myth of the meaning of the cosmos and life. History's taught us that what enables people to see themselves differently has been through religious awakenings which have birthed new religious movements. Such religious expressions arose when people were urged to transcend societal collapse, that of the Roman Empire, and of course that's the religion of Christianity. Or to be lifted up as the downtrodden ones. The history of Islam. It's very interesting to look at all the sociological background and of the history of the people in the Arab world. In each sense, there is a new naming of the verbal symbol God to express ultimate transcendent reality. I'll just remind you that in the Christian tradition we have something called the Trinity. What might be a 21st century might a 21st century religious expression look like?
Football.
Yeah. Yes, that's about as reduced as you can get. I know it's meaningful to so many people though. First, I don't think it is a melding or a collaboration of existing religions such as the Parliament of World Religions, and I don't put the kibosh on that. I'm sure there's a good purpose in that. But I don't think it's that. Rather, I think what emerges has to transcend, not necessarily negate, or depend on what part of which religious expression you might want to be talking about. It doesn't necessarily negate the religious expressions which arose in the past. I cautiously suggest that these defining characteristics for a 21st religious sensibility, what they might be. It would evolve in sync with the realities of our postmodern worldview. It would touch the imagination and hearts of ordinary people. It would crystallise a common vision of humanness and interconnected community. It would affirm a spirituality which emerges from valuing creation. It would be clear about the dehumanising forces which negate life. It would have the power to transform individuals and the social order with the freedom necessary to take responsibility for life. And it would acknowledge the ultimate reality of mystery, and that humans, while having to make choices for life, are never finally in charge of things. So, some might say, well, what about the existing religions? I'm going to be a bit controversial here and suggest that they will stand or fall by whether or not they can incorporate the above characteristics. Humanity's future challenges to forge a new overarching mythology which binds us together as a global family and transcends the reduced, life-denying forces with a spirituality and energy which reconciles, restores, and unites us to live a common future, all creatures of the life-giving Mother Earth.
Yeah.
So, for you to discuss and to ask again, the question I'm asking for each of these sections is, what more can be said? I don't think I have it there, did I? Anyway. Yes, what more can be said? Okay.
Jonathan, can I just ask you whether you, in the course of thinking about this, actually came up with a definition for religion? I mean, this is central to what we're discussing. We all have a clear idea that there are a variety of religions, but in your attempt to perhaps get a unifying hypothesis, how would you define religion?
Okay, I guess I didn't sort of start with myself by asking particularly what that, what the definition might be in terms of, I guess off the top of my head, I think I'm talking about ways in which we symbolise the meaning of life, who it is we are in the universe. How is it we relate together and relate ourselves to all of reality? And of course I include there the final mystery, which one might call God, or what others might call transcendent realities, and whatever verb use and whatever language they would use. So I'm not quite sure that's perhaps a satisfactory answer to your question, Justin.
Well, you don't have to answer the question.
No.
I just wondered, because I've read a book in the last month which I suppose has triggered my thoughts about this whole question. It's by a guy called David Dennett, who is professor of psychology at Harvard, one of the many probably professors of psychology at Harvard. But he does get very much into this whole question of the variety of religions, the variety of beliefs, and the thesis you're pushing, I think, comes from your own Christian background in some of the words you use. He doesn't say anything derogatory about religion, but he does question how it fits into the 21st, level of the 22nd century.
Yeah. Thanks. All right, let's, I think that, okay.
There is a definition of religion in law, the one that is the taxation one that allows you to give to religious purposes and for the purpose of claiming religious exemption from military service. I might send you a copy of it.
Thank you.
It would help justice as well, I'm sure.
Okay. Okay, well, let's go to our groups. Well, good friends, one more minute. One more minute. Okay, let's come together for our last moment of sharing together. And okay, who'd like to share from one of the groups, maybe on this side? Anyone? Grant, thank you.
Jonathan, we sort of come to the conclusion that religion may be a little bit more primal than what you've specified there, that it really is a mechanism for people to get through their day and stay safe and cope with what happens in the day. And it's closer to the mythology of how to survive. I mean, you could break those issues out, but I think there's more a primal nature to it.
Great, thank Grant. I mean, my question is, what more can be said? What else can be said? And I think that's what you're adding to the discussion. Thank you. All that.
Well, we had a rich one over here. Let me just, these aren't all my ideas, but we talked about football and Taylor Swift. And most of the dot points, other than the last one in particular, seem to almost fit.
Okay, so we have a apostle and Messiah. Okay. All right, well, I think that's it, folk. Thanks for staying with it. I tried to get the dynamics such that we weren't going to go over time, but you had enough time to discuss amongst yourselves these ideas, all of which are a bit like starting points. I mean, I don't pretend that this is an academic presentation, but I would like to suggest, though, that there are issues here which are those that have to be dealt with for, and while it sounds like we're going a little apocalyptic, I think we are conscious that we do live in a universe where the human will can go different ways to make what the future would like. And I trust that each will find some way, and perhaps our own religious experience may be very important in determining what that will be for each one of us. Over to you.
Well, firstly, whoops, is this one working? Yes. Yep, it's okay? Okay, sorry. Just sounded a bit, oh, stand back now. Too much. Firstly, let's all thank the Reverend Dr. Jonathan Barker for his presentation. And it was really good being interactive, so I think it worked really well. So thank you very much for that. Adult learning at its best. I hope it worked well online for those of you who are in that mode. There is a feedback sheet outside the front door, and would be grateful if you could make time to do that as you go and have a cup of tea or coffee or whatever, and have a talk amongst yourselves. Perhaps you can make time for the feedback sheet as well. As you probably all know, these forums are being held every month, the first Thursday of the month. So the next one's on the 4th of April, and it's the significance of the spirituality revolution by the Reverend Esmond Dowdy, who is right here. But he doesn't want to give away what he's going to say. But so you'll have to hold your fire and ask Jonathan instead. So that's, I think, all the formalities. Have I missed anything? No. Well, in that case, please feel free to go outside and socialise a bit, and hope to see you next time.